Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for tonight's shir. The series that we're going to be doing over the next couple of weeks is something which I am very passionate about. In general, as those who would have been following the various shirim from the Kollel, I have a passion and interest in Yanim of Beis Hamikdash, anything which is connected to the laws of the Beis Hamikdash construction. And I came across a number of years ago, while I was still a bacher, the Reshimas of the Rebbe. The Reshimas of the Rebbe are the Rebbe's notes on various topics. They can be Torah insights and they could be things that the Rebbe saw in the presence of the Frierdiker Rebbe, analysis of different things in Torah according to Nigla and Medrash and Chassidus. And one of those sections is what is known as the Reshimas Hamenorah. You could see over here, it's printed as a sefer, the Reshimas Hamenorah. What is the Reshimas Hamenorah that was authored by the Rebbe? This particular Reshima, this particular journal of notes of Torah teachings was written by the Rebbe in the year 1939, at the time when the Rebbe was living with the Rebbetzin in Paris. And the Rebbe wrote a treatise, wrote a dissertation on the topic of the lighting of the menorah according to the Shitta of the Rambam. The Rambam differs from most of the Rishonim on a number of issues pertaining to the preparation and the order of lighting of the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash, as well as the position and direction which the candles faced in the Beis Hamikdash on the menorah. And the Rebbe had authored, it was actually a response. There was a chassid or an individual by the name of Shmotkin, who the Rebbe had written a response, a tshuva, explaining the shitta of the Rambam. And the Frierdiker Rebbe, this is brought in the Hakdama to the Sefer, the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote a letter to the Rebbe who was living in Paris at the time. And the Frierdiker Rebbe asked that the Rebbe should prepare this Reshima, that he should take the response that he had prepared about the inyan of the Neiros HaMenorah, according to the Shitta of the Rambam and the other Shittas. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said that you should prepare it very well, you should write it up be'arichus, and you should order it in the form of a tshuva based on the lashonos, the terms and the teachings of the Mishnah, the Gemara, and the Halacha. And then in addition to that, you should also explain all of these ideas related to the menorah in Drush and Remez, the way they apply Begufa Adam, the way they parallel themselves within the body of a person. What is the menorah? What are the neiros? What is the Mikdash, the Beis Hamikdash, and all of its vessels represent in the person themselves? And in addition, you should also explain these according to the teachings of Chassidus. First, according to the Chassidus of the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid, which is Chassidus the Chlalus, and then particularly a way it is explained in Torah's Chassidus Chabad. And this was the request from the Frierdiker Rebbe. Now, it's actually quite a lengthy work. We're going to jump straight to the end, because whilst the beginning focuses more on the pilpul, the analysis of the Rambam's Shitta of the lighting of the menorah and the order of the candles of the menorah, and how the Rambam interprets the various Mishnayos, which itself is a fascinating journey. But we're going to jump, I suppose, to the cream of the crop, something which piqued my interest many, many years ago when I was young. And that is towards the end. After the Rebbe finishes his dissertation, he then fulfills that which the Frierdiker Rebbe asked, and that was to explain how all of these ideas, what is the menorah, what is the Beis Hamikdash, what are the various kelim, how they parallel themselves in the human psyche, in the soul of man as well. And that is going to be the topic that we're going to be looking at inside the text over the next few weeks. And that is the final section of the Reshimas Hamenorah, and that is Beis Hamikdash v'kelav al derech hadrush, the Beis Hamikdash and the kelim of the Beis Hamikdash explained in the teachings of Drush, in the teachings of Medrash and Chassidus. So I'm going to now bring up the text on the screen. You're welcome to follow along inside. Otherwise, feel free to listen. So, Beis Hamikdash v'kelav al derech hadrush. So to explain the design, the layout of the Beis Hamikdash and the kelim, the vessels that were used in the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash, according to the teachings of Drush. Ubir inyan hadlakas haneros va'plukta bezeh al derech hadrush. And in addition, the Rebbe is going to continue and explain the machloikas of the Rambam and the other Mefarshim in terms of the order and how the candles were lit in the Beis Hamikdash. The Rebbe will also explain them how they apply in Drush, in Avodas Ha'adam, in the way a person serves Hashem. So in order to understand that, Yuvan al Yudei Hakdama B'Ktsara Remazei HaMishkan Beis Hamikdash Ve'ezu Miprateim. Before we can jump to the order of the lighting of the menorah and the position of the menorah, we need to first lay the stage, and we therefore need to explain the Beis Hamikdash and the Mishkan, which was the forerunner and the prototype for the Beis Hamikdash, and to explain its details the way they also apply in the spiritual sense in Avodah. So the Rebbe gives a Hakdama, gives an introduction, and in this introduction, the Rebbe explains that everything that exists in the Olam, everything that exists within the world, exists within the Adam, exists within the person themselves. And therefore, the Rebbe concludes that the Beis Hamikdash, just as the Beis Hamikdash existed in space, the Beis Hamikdash with its various aspects exists within the soul of man as well. So the Rebbe says, Vuhu, Ki HaKadosh Baruch Hu bara es ha'olam u'meloyai. Hashem created, now if you note, as we're going, because these are the Reshimas, these are the Rebbe's notes in a journal form, the Rebbe writes, first of all, sometimes in abbreviated form. And in addition, the Rebbe will give references to various Sfarim. Many of those Sfarim the Rebbe did not actually have at his disposal at the time. And therefore, you'll see sometimes the Rebbe will give a reference and will not actually put the full source, the full citation. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world and everything within it. V'yitzer boyes ha'adam, and he formed man. V'yitzer is the lashon of the pasuk that he created man. L'shamesh es koinoi, to serve his creator. V'chol meshech yemei chayav, throughout his entire life. V'avodasa ba'olam al pi ha'torah v'darchei ha'mitzvos. That a person, man was created, not only man, but the entire world was created. And man was created upon the world with one purpose, and that purpose is to serve Hashem through the fulfillment of Torah and mitzvahs. Ki tachlis kol habriya hu b'shvil ha'adam. We know that the tachlis, the ultimate purpose, and the very pinnacle of all creation is for man. As it says, Kamayim Razal, in the Gemara in Brachos, Mai zeh ki zeh kol ha'adam. Shlomo HaMelech says at the end of Koheles, Ki zeh kol ha'adam, this is all. It says that this is all for man. What does that mean? Kol ha'olam kuloi lo nivra ela bishvil zeh. That after Shlomo HaMelech goes on and he explains how everything is hevel, everything is nothingness, everything is meaningless in this world, the pursuit of wealth and the pursuit of women and the pursuit of knowledge, etc., etc. So he says, Soif davar kol nishma es alikim yirav es mitzvahs of shemayim. That there is only one thing that is of importance, and that is to fear Hashem and to keep His mitzvahs. Ki zeh kol ha'adam. What does it mean? Ki zeh kol ha'adam, says the Gemara, that kol ha'olam kuloi, the entire world, lo nivra ela bishvil zeh, was only created for this one. The entire world was created for Adam, was created for man. The Adam and man, tachlis briyasoi l'shamesh es koinoi, the ultimate tachlis of man's creation is for the service of his creator. So the world was created for Adam, who is the pinnacle of creation, and Adam was created in order to serve his teacher. Indeed, this is what the Navi says, Anoichi asisi eretz va'adam aleha barasi, that I created the world and I placed Adam upon it. And the word barasi, I have created, has the gematria of Tariyag, 613. Because Adam, Hashem says, I created the world, and Adam aleha barasi, I created man upon it for the purpose of keeping all of the mitzvahs of the Torah. Adam shu ikar habriya masim l'tachlisa. And therefore, says the Rebbe, when man lives up to his purpose, he lives and conducts himself in accordance with his tachlis for which he was created, which is for the mitzvahs, umakayim hamuto alav, and he fulfills that which has been placed upon him, the responsibility of keeping in Torah mitzvahs. Harezeh tachlis shleimusoi. This is the ultimate shleimus, perfection, not only for man, v'gam shleimus kol ha'olam kuloi shloi nivra ela bishviloi. But it also brings completion and wholeness to the entire world, because indeed the entire world was only created for man, and man was created for the purpose of fulfilling the mitzvahs of the Torah for the service of Hashem. V'zehu gam kein remes kosher inyanim b'maimer azal kiddushin pei beis lo nivru ela l'shamsheni v'ani nivresi l'shamesh es koini. So it says in the Gemara in Kiddushin that all of creation, everything that exists, is there to serve me, is served to serve man. And I, man, was created l'shamish koini, to serve my master, to serve Hashem. So what do we see? That by man serving Hashem, he brings fulfillment for the tachlis of all of creation, and therefore elevates it as well. Drush Razal, as Chazal explain, our pasuk Yom Hashishi, the Gemara in Shabbos, Daf Peches, the Sugya Matan Torah tells us, why does the Torah say in the days of creation? Each day it says Yom Echad, Yom Sheni, Yom Shlishi. When it comes to the sixth day, it says Yom Hashishi with a Hey, the sixth day. Then what is the sixth day? It is a reference to the sixth day of Sivan. The sixth day of Sivan, which was, of course, Matan Torah, the day of Shavuos, because on that day, that is when creation really had its purpose. And Hashem made a condition, a stipulation with creation when he finished on the sixth day. If the Jewish people, 26 generations later, are going to accept the Torah, then atem miskayimim, then the world will endure, because the world will have meaning and will have purpose. That if the Jewish people will not accept the Torah at that time, then the world will cease to be, because it no longer has purpose. And therefore, what the Rebbe is bringing out over here is this idea, is that man, and particularly the Jewish people's observance of Torah and mitzvahs, is the realization of the entire tachlis, of the entirety of creation. V'lachein, says the Rebbe, therefore, b'min ha'adam gufa tachlisoihu adam hashalim b'das u'v'maiseh. So out of all creation, man is the pinnacle. Man is the ultimate tachlis of creation. Now within the entire min hamedaber, within the entire species of man, the ultimate tachlis amongst all of man is for a man who is shalem b'da'as u'v'maiseh. Someone who is whole and perfect in their da'as, their mind, their understanding of Hashem and Torah, u'v'maiseh, and their deeds. Now, this terminology comes from the Rambam in his Hakdama to Pirush HaMishnayos, and there the Rambam explains how when Hashem created man in a way that the majority of people are reikim min hachachma. The majority of people lack true wisdom. We know that the Rambam, wisdom was the ultimate quality a person could have, and the Rambam says the people of true wisdom are few and far between. And therefore, an ish hachacham, a wise person, is maybe only echad badar, only one person in each generation will fit this category. If so, why does Hashem create all of the other people of the world? Hashem creates all of the other people of the world to provide the needs for this one person who is shalem b'da'as u'v'maiseh, this one person who is perfect in their understanding of Hashem and their fulfillment of the Torah and mitzvahs. Bringing out the idea that the entire creation was created for man in general, and the entire species of man was created for the perfect ultimate paradigm of what man is supposed to be, and that is a person who is complete in their da'as and their ma'aseh. Uchamaimer ben Zoyma, the Rebbe quotes the Gemara in Brachas, Daf Nun Ches, where Ben Zoyma the sage said, "Keshara uchlusa agabe maile b'har habayis." Ben Zoyma the sage was standing on a step on Har Habayis, and he saw an uchlusa. He saw a gathering of 600,000 Jewish people. And when he saw 600,000 Jewish people, Amar, he said, Baruch Chacham Harazim. He made the bracha. There's a bracha that one says, when one sees 600,000 Jewish people gathered together, the number of Jewish people who left Mitzrayim, he makes the bracha, Baruch Chacham Harazim, blessed is Hashem, who is the one who is wise in all secrets. That Hashem is able to know what is in the hearts of every single man. 600,000, we know, the Alter Rebbe tells us in Tanya that is the number of sparks of souls that exist, and from that comes all of the other neshamas, and therefore one makes a bracha. But then Ben Zoyma concluded, Ubaruch shebara kol eila lisham sheni, and blessed is the one who created all of these 600,000 Jews, lisham sheni, in order to serve me. The af shahaisa uchusa. Even though Ben Zoyma was looking at a grouping of 600,000 Jews, the ein uchus of pchusa mishishim riboy, it means a minimum of 600,000. Shu'aklal v'kibbutz hayoser shalem, which, as the Sfarim bring down, that this is the collective of the Jewish people, and therefore represents the Jewish people in a very perfect state, in a state of wholeness. And therefore Ben Zoyma looked at the Jewish people on a very lofty level. And that is why we make a bracha. And he, Ben Zoyma himself, made the bracha, Baruch Chacham Harazim. Because once you have 600,000, we know that we don't all think alike. Everyone's got their own ways of understanding things. But when you have 600,000 represents all the different types of deus, perspectives, and personalities that there could be. And when Ben Zoyma saw this uchlusa, this gathering of 600,000 Jewish people, which represents a sense of totality and perfection, he saw them in a very elevated state. That the Jewish people, what were they doing at Har HaBayis at that time? They had come to be oile l'regel, and therefore they had come for a spiritual experience. They've come to an elevated spiritual activity, and Ben Zoyma is looking at them on this lofty level. And nonetheless, since Ben Zoyma, like the Rambam describes, was an ish hashalim b'da'asu v'maisa, someone who was perfect and on a completely different league in their spiritual standing, and therefore he was completely above and beyond the rest of the Jewish people. And that's why it says that Ben Zoyma was standing on Har HaBayis to show how he was lifted up above everybody else. He said that all of these Jewish people were created in order to serve him. So that's the introductory section of this drush. So basically, to summarize what the Rebbe has explained, is that the world was created for a tachlis, for a purpose, and that tachlis is man. Within man themselves, the tachlis of man is to serve Hashem through keeping Torah and mitzvahs, and that applies to all mankind, all of the Jewish people. And yet, amongst the Jewish people themselves, amongst the Min HaMedaber themselves, the ultimate level for which everything was ultimately created, like Ben Zoyma said, was for the Ish HaShalem B'das Uva Maisa. But the point the Rebbe is bringing out, as we're going to see in the next paragraph, is that if the whole world was created for man, and the whole world depends on man, therefore man in some way encapsulates and embodies the entirety of creation. And therefore there are going to be parallels between man and the world, between man and the rest of creation. So says the Rebbe, V'zehu hashivui, this is the comparison, v'dimyon, and similarity, bein ha'adam v'ha'olam, that man and the world have similarities between them. Shekmoisha adam hu guf echad mechuber mikama evarim, that if we look at a person, when you look at a person, an individual, you see one mensch, you see one person. We see Reuven, or you see Shimon, but that one person is made up of various elements. One body has many evarim, 248 limbs that comprise the body. And these 248 elements, each one is different. Each one has their own unique function, their own unique contribution to the Adam. Yet they form one guf, they form one koima, they form one Adam Shalem. Kach kama olam, so says the Rebbe, so to the world. Kuloi hu binyan echad shalem. Even though the world also comprises different elements, there are mountains, there are trees, there are rivers, there are oceans, there is different countries, different populations, different species of animals, etc. Nonetheless, it all creates one macrocosm. It all creates one ecosystem. It all creates one world. Hein mitzad ha'poel, and says the Rebbe, this similarity between man and the world is mitzad the poel, the creator, shekel echad bara'am, that Hashem created both of them. Hashem created the world in its way, and He created man in His way. Hey mitzana tachlis, but also the tachlis, also for the purpose for which man and the world exists, is the same as well. In Pirkei Avos Perek Vav, it says that everything Hashem created in this world, He created for His honor. It exists in order to serve Him. Hein mitzad inyonei atzmai. So what does that mean? That means obviously not only man. Man was created lichvoide, to serve Hashem and bring honor to Hashem, but everything that exists in the physical world is there to bring honor to Hashem. There's a fascinating sikha from the Rebbe where when the Tanya Shirim began on the radio, there were frum Jews who didn't like this idea. They thought that the radio is a treifa keli, that it's used for immodest and immoral things. And therefore, how could you use such a thing, such a vehicle for the teachings of Torah and the teachings of Tanya, Pnimis HaTorah. So the Rebbe was fiery in response, and the Rebbe said a sicha, and the Rebbe said that anyone who takes this belief is a kofer in Torah, because it says in the Mishnah, everything was created in this world to serve Hashem. Everything has a potential to be used in the service of Hashem, and that includes not only things Hashem created, but anything that comes into being, including radio waves, frequencies, and transistors. And therefore, they too were created l'shamishas koinei. And that is certainly true with regards to man as well. Hein mitzad inyanei atzmai, and also in terms of the inyan, the thing itself, shekol chelkei ha'olam hen koima achas shlema. That just as man is one being, is one koima, even though he comprises multiple elements and various limbs and organs, so too the world is a koima achas shlema, is like one koima, is like one being, it's like one body, even though it comprises various elements as well. And therefore, just as man, like the Gemara in Sanhedrin says, whoever saves one Jewish life, one person, it's as though they've saved the entire world. So just as one man is likened into the entire world, and the Avos to Rabbi Nassan tells us that everything that exists within the world exists within man. So the world is like the macrocosm and man is like the microcosm. The Avos to Rabbi Nassan says whatever we find within the world, we find within man as well. So for example, and why do we say this? Because there are two psukim. One pasuk says, Eile toldos shamayim ba'aretz behi baram. These are the chronicles, the generations of heaven and earth when they were created. And another pasuk says, Eile toldos Adam, these are the generations of man. So we liken man to the world. So just as, for example, the world has oceans, which is salty water, man has tears, which is salty water. Just as the oceans has rivers and streams, man passes urine from his body in the form of a stream, in the form of a flow. Just as the world has forests of trees, man has hair on his body, which is like the yar, like the forest. And so on and so forth. The Avos to Rabbi Nassan shows how everything that exists within the world in the macro sense is paralleled in the Adam in the micro sense. Kain gam ha'olam nikra Adam gadol. Just as the Adam is called an olam katan, man is called a small world, a micro of the world. So too, the olam is called an Adam gadol, is called a macro man, again because of the parallels between man and the world. And those parallels exist on the fact that they were both created by Hashem. Man and world was created for the same tachlis, which is to serve Hashem. And the fact that even though man and the world comprise various elements, they ultimately create one being. The Gemara in Brachos says, so we're familiar with this idea from the teachings of Chassidus, which talks about the divine chayus, the godly vitality, which gives life to the world, which we refer to as memale kol almin, the world, the light which infuses the world to give it its chayus, to give it its existence. And the Gemara says that just as Hashem fills the world, that Hashem's presence fills the world, and Hashem's presence gives life to the world, so too, kach haneshama memale saguf, so too the neshama fills the body. The neshama comes down into the body to give chayus to the body. Of a Medrash Tilim, the Medrash Tilim says in the inverse, in the opposite, Apasuk Baruchi Nafshi, let my soul bless Hashem. Ma hanefesh memale saguf, kach hakadosh baruch hu memale es ha'olam. It says it in the opposite fashion, that just as the neshama fills the body, so too Hashem fills the world. So we have, the world has body and soul. The body is the physicality of the world, and the soul is the godly chayus, which fills that world. So too, Adam comprises guf and neshama, the body and the soul gives it its vitality. And we see the parallel between the two, that the world and Adam are really macro and micro of the same idea. And therefore, whatever exists in one, by extension, must exist within the world. And why is that? Because man and the world are comparable one to the other. They're in alignment with one another. Therefore, says the Rebbe, If we understand based on this premise, if we look at the Adam and the way our own body functions, the way our own soul functions, with that we can understand to a degree how things operate in the macro Adam, which is the world. We know that the chayus that we have comes from our neshama. It's the neshama that gives life and vitality to the body, and that includes every single limb of the body. The fact that every part of the body does its functions, the legs can walk, the hands move, the stomach digests, etc., etc. So that all comes from the neshama. But the neshama, whilst it is there present throughout the entire body, the primary resting place of the neshama is in the seichel, in the brain, in the head. As the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya in Perek Tes, that the neshama, the nefesh elikis, resides in the mayach shebarash, in the brain. And that is where, of course, the seichel is. The brain is the control center of the entire body. Af haneshama mamala kol haguf. And from that, the neshama then spreads the entire body. So what happens is as follows. The neshama rests in the brain, and the brain then directs the rest of the body. That is where there is a hispashtus, an emanation of the light of the neshama goes from the brain, is nimshach to everywhere else. So where in the human body is the neshama revealed? Where is the power of the neshama present in a more revealed way? That is in the mayach shebarash, that is in the brain. And if that exists within the micro, within Adam, that even though the neshama is present within the entire body to make it do everything that it does, yet there is one place within the body where there is a primary revelation of the chayus and the gilui of the neshama, the same must apply within the world as well. So too it is in the world, and the word olam comes from the word helem. Helem meaning concealment. Why is the world called concealment? Because ein elokus begalui, because godliness is not revealed in the world. Chassidus teaches us that in order to create a finite world, in order to create a limited physical creation, Hashem had to contract and conceal the power of his infinite light, the Or Ein Sof, through a process of tzimtzum and ishtalshalus, and as it moves further and further down, the divine light becomes more and more hidden until in our world, we don't see godliness at all. All we see is the physicality of the world. Or in the lashon of Adamli, we don't see the signs, we don't see Hashem's presence in our world. But that only refers to the world at large. But just like in the body, whilst we don't necessarily see the presence of the neshama in the rest of the body in a revealed way, but in the brain we do, so too in the world there was one space, there was one place where godliness was manifest and revealed in an open way. The Mishkan and the Mikdash, which were referred to as the Oire Shel Olam, the light of the entire world, because from the Beis Hamikdash godliness shone to the entire world. The Yud Nisim Nasul Aviseinu Beis Hamikdash, and therefore when one came to the Beis Hamikdash, one witnessed open revelation of godliness. Pirkei Avos tells us that there were 10 miracles that happened in the Beis Hamikdash on a daily basis. A miracle is a revelation of godliness beyond nature. Because whereas nature hides and conceals Hashem's presence, miracles are a revelation of Hashem's presence. So in the Beis Hamikdash, one saw open Gilui Elokus in the form of these miracles. And when the Jewish people were oile l'regel, the pasuk, the Torah tells us that the Jewish people have to be oile l'regel shalish pa'amim b'shana 3 times in the year, and they have to come le'ra'is pnei ha'adain havaya, in order to be seen by Hashem. And they saw liros. It's just as they came lerois, they also came liros to see godliness. They saw the pnei. Pnei means pnimius. They saw the essential revelation of Hashem's presence in the Beis Hamikdash. The Mishkan of Beis Hamikdash hayu memutzayim shayadam haya haaretz elokus b'chol ha'olam. Just like the brain is an interface. The brain is an intermediary. That the neshama comes down and it rests in the brain where it's powerful and revealed, and the brain then sends that revelation of the neshama to the rest of the body. So just as the brain serves as a mamutza, so too the Beis Hamikdash and the Mishkan is like the brain, the head of all of existence, and therefore it serves as a mamutza because godliness shines in an open and revealed way within the Mishkan or within the Beis Hamikdash, And from there, a ha'ara, a ray of this godliness, emanates to the entire world. Uchamayim Razal, like the Medrash tells us in Tanchuma, when a person would build a house back in the pre-electricity era, they would build it in such a way that the windows were narrow on the outside, and as it moved through the thickness of the wall to the inside, it got wider and wider to direct the sunlight into the house. But of course, the Beis Hamikdash did not require light. Hashem's light filled the Beis Hamikdash, and instead the windows of the Beis Hamikdash were shkufim atumim. They were narrow on the inside, and as they went outwards, they extended outwards to radiate and cast the light of godliness from the Beis Hamikdash to the entire world. Why was it this way? That the light would go out from the Beis Hamikdash to illuminate the entire world. And this is another reason why it says that the Mishkan is shakul. The Mishkan is equivalent to the entire world, because it is from the Mishkan that godliness was brought to the entire world. And indeed, the Medrash tells us that whatever existed within the world had a corresponding thing in the Mishkan itself. Just like the brain. The brain has in it, or the brain controls all of the functions of the body, and therefore the capacity of sight of the eye is present in the brain. The ability of hearing of the ear is there within the brain. The ability of movement and digestion and the heartbeat and the pulse, etc., it's all there in the nucleus of the brain. And therefore, in the brain of creation, which is the Mishkan and Beis Hamikdash, all of creation, the entire world, exists within the Mishkan itself. So, for example, the Kiyar, which was filled with water, that represents the waters of the world. The menorah, which is the lights, represents the stars and the celestial planets and the sun and the like. And so too, all of the aspects of creation all have their counterpart. The heavens is like the Urios, the curtains on the Mishkan, and it was all found there present in the Mishkan. Just to summarize, before we move on, we've now established that just as man parallels the world, therefore, just as in man, the brain is the control center where there is the primary revelation of the neshama, and from there it directs the rest of the body, so too in the world there is a brain, there is a place of primary revelation of Hashem's presence, and that is the Beis Hamikdash itself. And from there the Beis Hamikdash brings godliness to the entire world, and therefore whatever exists within the world must exist within the Beis Hamikdash as well. And being that man and the world are comparable one to the other, therefore whatever exists in the Beis Hamikdash must exist within man himself as well. Okay, we're going to move on to the next page, and therefore says the Rebbe as follows. And for this, we're going to need a little bit of words of introduction. The Rebbe is going to reference the Rambam in Hilchos Deos, as Hilchos Yesodei Torah. In the opening of the Mishnah Torah, the Rambam discusses Maaseh Bereshis and Maaseh HaMerkava. These are the deepest secrets of the Torah. The Maaseh Bereshis refers to the works of creation. And then you have the Maaseh HaMerkava, which refers to the worlds of the angels, the divine throne, and the various spiritual worlds. And these are the deep secrets of the Torah, which in general are not to be taught except for in limited ways and to limited students. And the Rambam took a lot of flack when the Rambam in his halachas of Yesodei Torah brings some of the discussion of both Maaseh HaMerkava and Maaseh Bereshis. There were those who wanted to burn the Sefer HaMaddah, which was just started learning of the Rambam, saying that it was heretical at worst, and at best should not have been put into writing and given out to the masses to be able to learn. But nonetheless, in Kabbalah and Chassidus, it draws very heavily on these ideas and on these teachings. And so therefore what I would like to share with you, and what the Rebbe is going to share with us, is how the Rambam explains that within creation, we find that all of creation can be divided into three elements, into three specific spheres of existence. So the Rebbe says as follows: the world in general, all of existence, so everything that exists within our entire universe, can be divided up, like the Rambam does, into three divisions, into three groupings. As the Rambam writes in the Mishnah Torah, in the Yad HaChazaka, in Yesodei HaTorah, Perek Beis and Perek Gimel. In the Lashon of the Rambam says that whatever Hashem created in His world can be divided into three distinct groupings. The Rebbe does not go into the full elaboration and terminology of the Rambam, but summarizes what these three groupings are. The Chashiv Sham, the Rambam mentions there, number one, Olam HaShafel. Now this term, Olam HaShafel, is actually from the Pirush HaMishnayos. It means the lowly physical world. It means all physical existence within our world, which includes the animals, it includes the plants, it includes minerals, etc. Sheberuav mechubarim megoylam v'tzura. That their existence is comprised and made up of both goylam, substance, matter, and tzura, and form. Now let's stop and just dwell on these terms of goylam and tzura. We're perhaps more familiar with the terminology of chomer and tzura. Chomer means matter, a substance. Tzura means form. And the best way to elaborate is by an example. You have a table, a wooden table. So the chomer, or the goylam, the material, the substance is wood. The same as a tree, the same as a bench, the same as a chair. The table is wood. That is the chomer, that is the goylam, that is the substance. The tzura is the form that it takes, and therefore its function. So the tzura will be that the wood of the table has four legs, it has a flat top, etc., and that is what differentiates it from other things made of wood. Or in the case of a silver candlestick, the goylam, the chomer, the substance, the matter is silver, is pure raw silver, but the tzura, the form it's been shaped into, is the tzura, that is the candlestick. So if you're to look at a candlestick and say it's a piece of silver, you'd be right. It is. All it is a piece of silver. But there's something more over here. There's a form, there's a shape. Whereas the chomer, the goylam, the actual substance of matter is more physical. It's a physical substance. The tzura, the form, is something more spiritual. It's something more abstract. It's something which is more artistic and creative. And therefore, everything, the Rambam writes, everything that exists in our world has goylam and tzura, has chomer, it has its physical substance that it's made of, its elements, and it has its tzura, its form. The Rambam goes on to explain, of course, based on the philosophy at the time, which is explained in Kabbalah, that everything is made up of four elements. Everything in existence is made up of fire, earth, air, and water. So that is the substance of everything in the world. But the tzura is planted into it, that it's a more spiritual element that shapes it into what it is. So the Rambam says in our world, in the physical world, anything physical that exists is made up of goylam v'tzura, is made up of substance, matter, v'tzura, and form. Hoivim v'nifsadim umishtanim. And they come into being, and they decay, and they change from one type to the other. So for example, you have a tree which will grow, and the tree will then shed its leaves, the leaves decompose and become the earth, etc., and they change from one form to the other. Hoivim, they grow, nifsadim, they decay. And this is true not only of plant life, but even the mineral world within our world, even rocks and metals and elements, etc., they all fall into this category of physical things, which ultimately, albeit at a slower rate, are hoivim v'nifsadim umishtanim. So that's the lowest level of existence. The lowest chelek of existence is what the Rambam describes as olam hashafel. So if I'll just bring it up, you should be able to see it on the screen. I'll bring it up as follows. So you have over here, the first level of existence is mehem bruim shem mechubarim megoylam betzura mehem hoivim nisadim tamid k'may gufa sa'adam v'abahema v'atzmachim v'matchas. The Rambam says that this includes the body of man, which of course is something which is created but then decays, behemoths, animals, tzmachim, vegetation, and matchas and metals, the elements of the earth as well. Now the Rebbe tells us about the second grouping within creation. And says the Rambam as follows. I'll highlight the words so that you can see where we are up to. We have Olam HaGalgalim. The next level of creation is the Olam HaGalgalim. The Galgalim refer to the celestial orbits. The celestial orbits which include the sun, the moon, the stars, etc. And in the writings of the Rambam, the sun and the moon and the stars are not just inanimate things. In fact, they have a soul, they have a neshama, and they have a profound understanding of their creator as well. Now, this Olam HaGalgalim, Shem Gamkein Bale Goylam B'tzura, they, like the creations of the physical world down here, they also comprise both chomer, substance, B'tzura, and form. However, they differ to the substance and form of the physical creations down here, man and the animals and plants. Ava Einam Mishtanim, they do not change. So whereas things in our world change, and some more rapidly than others, that things decay and things change from one form to the other. But when one looks at the sun and the moon and the stars, etc., they change very little. The Gomam Zach Ubarur Vanaki. And therefore they differ from us, number one, in terms of their form, and also not only their form, but also their goylam. Even their physical substance is different to that of ours, in that it is zach, barur, vanaki. Whereas in our world, the things in our world comprise of coarse physicality. The Galgalim are considered to be more refined types of existence. They're a more elevated level of existence. Not only is their physicality more refined and elevated, the Rambam describes how they have a tremendous seichel and understanding of godliness, and they praise their creator. Indeed, the Medrash tells us that when Yeshua stopped the sun to fight his battle, he said, Shemesh begivoin doin. Let the sun stand still in Givoin. And what does that mean? That doin means to be silent. That Yeshua instructed the sun to stop singing its song of praise to Hashem. And Chassidus explains that when the orbits move from east to west, that is like them bowing down to the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah is in the mind of the Shekhinah, the divine presence is in the west, like the Kodesh HaKadoshim in the Beis Hamikdash, which was in the west. And when they move through their celestial orbits towards the west, it is like they are bowing down, and that is because they are singing a praise of Hashem, a praise of their Creator. In order to praise one's Creator, one needs to have an understanding of Creator. And the Rambam writes that the Galgalim have a das ad l'ma'od, have a very deep and profound understanding of Hashem. So that is the second level of creation. And to bring it up on the on the slides over here, the Rambam in his second category says that the second group of creations are the bruim sheim mechubarim megoylim b'tzura. They do not change. These are the orbits and the stars and the planets that orbit within these orbits. So that is the second level of creation. And now we come to the third and final order of creation, and that is Olam HaMalachim, the world of the angels. Now when it comes, again, let's just summarize. The lowest chelik of creation is our physical world, the things within our world, which comprise of goylam, they comprise of substance, which is coarse material, and they also have a tzura, they also have a spiritual form, and therefore they come into being and they decay. That's the lowest level. The next level up is the galgalim, the celestial orbits, which whilst they have a goylam, a chomer, they have substance, there is matter, but like in space, it's a more ethereal, it's a more spiritual, a more elevated and able form of matter. And then we come to the world of the malachim, the angels. What are angels? Angels, says the Rambam, are tzura beloy goylam. They are form without matter. And going back to what we said by our discussion, substance, matter is a certain level of physicality. Form is spirituality. When we talk about angels, while we like to draw angels as having a body, we like to draw angels with a particular substance. And the Ramban, in fact, says that angels do have a body. The Ramban says that the angels' bodies are made of fire and air, but the Rambam's shita is that angels do not have a body at all. They have no physical substance at all. What are they? They are pure tzura. They are pure spirituality. They are midos. They are certain expressions. So, for example, Malach Michal is an attribute of chesed. Malach Gabriel is an attribute of gevura. It's a tzura beloy goylam. And the Malachim obviously says the Rambam, Yoidim Esaboyre De Gedoyle Adla Ma'oid, they have an even greater understanding of their Creator. And therefore, these are the three elements of creation. Our world, which is coarse physicality, with the tzura, with the spiritual form. The world of the Galgalim, which is a more refined physicality, a more refined substance with a spiritual form. And then we have the angels, which are pure form without any physicality. These are the three elements within the world. Says the Rebbe, "Ubelashon haKabbalah v'Chasidus, olam espiyah haklalim upratim." In the lashon of Chasidus, the world and existence is also divided into three worlds. Now, whilst we talk about four worlds, the world of Atzilus, the world of Bria, the world of Yetzirah and Asiya, the world of Atzilus is a world which is completely Eloki. It's a world which is completely godly, completely bottled to Hashem, and therefore it is still part of the ayin, the nothingness that precedes creation. The worlds of Yesh, the worlds of creation, are the worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. And the worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya exist in a macro sense and in a micro sense, but either way, we see that the world and everything in existence is also divided into three levels. And these three levels parallel the three levels that the Rambam was discussing as well. Interesting to point out that, of course, our world is the world of Asiya, and therefore that is like the things within our world. The world of Bria is the world of the angels, and that parallels the Olam HaMalachim that the Rambam spoke about. And the world of Yetzirah, whilst it is also a spiritual world, it is also a world of the angel, but it is more defined than the world of Bria. There is more substance in the world of Yetzirah. And therefore, these three levels exist in the world in a sense like the Rambam describes, and the Rambam is describing in a physical and a literal sense. Chassidus explains that it exists also in a spiritual sense, that all of existence can be divided into three. And therefore, just as we've said that man mirrors the world and the world mirrors man, everything that exists within the world must exist within man as well. And therefore, just as in the world we find these three different spheres, these three different levels of existence that the Rambam describes, so too these three different levels must exist within man as well. And what is that? So the Rebbe says, the olam, the micro world of man, also comprises of these three spheres, these three levels, groupings of existence. We have olam hamachshava, olam hadibur, va'olam hamaisa. Those who've learned Tanya are familiar with these three phrases, that these are the levushim of the neshama, that these are the three garments of the soul. That how does the neshama interact and impact the world around us? How does the neshama, so to speak, communicate with the world around us? How does the neshama bring out its intellect and emotions into action? It is through one of three levushim: thought, speech, and action. And those are like the created worlds. Again, if we go back to this prototype of the four worlds in Kabbalah, Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. So Atzilus is a world of the spheres. And in Atzilus there are three intellectual spheres, Chachma, Bina, and Das, and the seven emotional spheres of Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchus. And so too in the soul, the neshama possesses the 10 koichas hanefesh. We have our intellectual capabilities of Chachma, Bina, and Das, and we also have our emotional drives and urges of our midos. But all of that is like the world of Atzilus. That is the neshama itself. That is like Atzilus. The world of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, which is the worlds of creation, in the man, they are paralleled by the three levushim, the most inner being our machshava, our thoughts, which remain within us. That is how we communicate to ourselves. Dibur, our speech, which is how we communicate to others. That is like the world of Yetzirah. And of course, Maisa, which is the most physical, the most finite, and the most impactful of our expressions. That is like the world of Asiya. So says the Rebbe, Teva Maisa, she'etzela adam gama Maisa shloi mechuber migoylam v'tzura. Maisa, our action, parallels that lowest strata of existence that Rambam described, which has coarse physicality, as well as a tzura, a spiritual form. Our maisa, our action, is of course physicality. There's the things that we do and the things that we make. But there is also a tzura, there is also a spiritual form. And what is that? Unlike animals, everything a human being does is with seichel. And therefore, any action that I do, if a person moves their hand to write, if a person moves their feet to walk or to dance, it is their seichel, their intellect, which is directing the action to be in a particular way. So the action is the goylam, the action is the chomer, that is the substance, but the tzura, the form, which gives meaning and direction to that action, that is the seichel which is driving that action, whatever that action may be. Ava b'chol zeh, says the Rebbe, even though there is a seichel behind everything we do, mitzad ha-goylam, if we look just at the action itself, guf ha'maisa, just the action, mishtabehu l'shar ha'nivroim, it is like the rest of creation itself. If you were to put a monkey in front of a typewriter, a monkey would also be able to push the keys on the typewriter. If you gave a monkey a cell phone, it would also be able to swipe across the screen. Obviously, it's lacking the seichel dimension, and that's why whatever it types or whatever it does will be meaningless and will be nonsense. But in the action side of things, the animal's actions is the same as the actions of man. And therefore, the goylam, the chomer of our action, the physical substance of our action, is something which is lowly. It's very coarse and very material. Then we have a dibur. Hadibur gamhu megoylam v'tzurahu. Our speech also comprises both physical action, the movement of our mouths, the movement of our lips to articulate syllables, but there is also a tzura. There is the seichel, which tells us how to form letters and words and how to convey ideas within those words. Aval. But if we were to compare the goylam, the chomer of the action of speech to that of maisa, in speech, go moizach v'naki, like the celestial orbits, the physicality in speech is a little bit more edo, it's a little bit more subtle. So we know that a person is only liable for penalty for averos that one does through action. But if one does so with their mouth, so we say, that the movement of a person's lips, that is considered an action, and therefore a person is considered liable for breaking an oath and the like. However, it is only a maisa zuta. It's considered, like the Rashba writes, it's only a small action. Action with one's hands or with one's feet, with one's body, that is a strong, concrete action. Speech, whilst it is a maisa, it's a maisa zuta. Or it's considered, speech is considered like action only because it leads to action. That is based on a halacha. We know that one is not allowed to thresh with two different species of animals together, and that's a form of kilayim. And if a person were to have a donkey or a horse and a cow harnessed together, and they were to say here with their mouth and cause the animal to move, they would be liable. And Tosfos addresses, how could you be liable if there's no action, it's only words? So Tosfos answers that because the action of my mouth leads to an action of the animals moving, therefore my speech is also considered action as well. But even though speech is a form of action, but speech is more aligned with one's intellect. And that is why man is called, even though man's uniqueness is our seichel, is our intellect. That is what sets us apart from all other animals, all other creations. Nonetheless, what are we called? We are called min hamedaber, the speaking species. Why is that? Because dibur, speech, congruent, articulate communication is bound up with seichel. There's an interesting halacha. We know a cheresh shoyte v'katan, someone who lacks da'as, one of these three categories of individual, a child or a deaf mute, or someone who has lost their mental capacity. So they are considered in halacha not to have da'as, and therefore anything that they say through dibur is not binding. Their dibur is ein lahem. They don't have dibur. But a ma'aseh yesh lahem, something that they do, an action does have validity. Why is that? because dibur, speech, is more spiritual, it's more refined and more connected to the intellect, whereas action, like we said before, actions of a human being can resemble that of the other creations as well. And then we have the most lofty of all of our levushim, and that is our thought. She'ein sham goylam. Whereas in action there is clearly goylam, there's clearly a physical action. In dibur, in speech, whilst it's a maisa zuta, there is still the action of moving one's mouth. But in machshava, in thought, there is no goylam. It's like the world of the malachim, the world of the angels, where there is no physical substance, there is no physical action at all, and it is purely spiritual. It is purely a tzura. The amru demaisa merkava nikra davar gadol yediyas haboyre yideya gedola hine bedibur nimtza rak rashe aprakim umevim midaita v'yeda soif hadava v'oinkoy. And we'll finish with this idea. Therefore, says the Rebbe, we spoke about before the Maisa Merkava, the deep secrets of Torah, which describe the worlds of the angels. So it says about that, which it's called a davar gadol, and this is talking about understanding our Creator, understanding Hashem. So it says that when you teach these ideas to a student in dibur, in speech, you only give the Rashi Haprakim. You only give the general macro level details, the macro points. And then who mavin midaita, the student, if they're a seasoned student, if they are a worthy student, then mavin bedaita v'yedei saf davar v'oinkoy. So therefore, what do we see? Is when we talk about the world of the angels, which is the Maisa HaMerkava, that is aligned with daitoi. That's like the world of thought. So really, just to summarize tonight's shir, and everyone is welcome to join us again next Monday night for the continuation. We said that man parallels the world. Man and the world have a common purpose, that is to serve Hashem, and the entire world was created for man, and man was created to serve Hashem. Man is an olam katan, is a microcosm of the entire world, and the olam is an adam gadol, is a macro of man. And therefore, everything that exists within the world exists within man, and everything within man exists within the world. In man, the primary revelation of the neshama in an open way is in the brain, and from there it's mispashet, it spreads to the rest of the body. And so too in the world, even though the world is a place where godliness is concealed and hidden, there is a brain of the world, a place where godliness is openly revealed. The neshama of the world is openly revealed, and that is the site of the Beis Hamikdash, of the Mishkan. The Beis Hamikdash and the Mishkan, as well as paralleling the brain of man, also includes within it, in a nucleus form, the entirety of existence. And therefore, just as, and so too with man, just as the world, like the Rambam describes, everything in our universe is divided into three halakim, into three groupings, which is the world of the physical world, which things have coarse material physicality. Then there is the world of the Galgalim, the world of the celestial orbits, where there is a greater tzura, a greater spiritual recognition of Hashem, and a more refined physicality. And then there is the pinnacle, the world of the angels, which is pure spirituality without any physical substance. These three elements exist within man, and they are the worlds of Bri, Yetzirah, and Asiyah within man, which is the world of Machshava, which is pure spirit without any physical action. There is Dibur, which is physical action, but a slight, minor, limited physical action. But speech is more spiritual, more connected to the mind. And then we have our Maisa, our action, which is the most finite, the most physical, the most corporeal of our levushim, and that parallels the world of the physical, coarse creations, the Olam HaShafal, in the words of the Rambam. And the Rebbe is now going on to explain that if we see these three levels of existence within the world, and therefore they exist within man, then just as everything in man exists within his brain, and everything in the world exists within the Beis Hamikdash, so too we must find these three stratas of existence within the structure and the avodah of the Beis Hamikdash as well. So stay tuned. Please join us again next week, Monday at 8:30, for the continuation of the Reshimas Hamishkan. Thank you for joining, and have a wonderful evening. Okay, if there are any questions, everyone is welcome. I'll stick around if you have any questions.
Rabbi Johnson.
I see in the chat, just over here, the Reshima, for those who are looking, who want the number of the Reshima. This is Reshima, I believe it is Reshima Ayin. Hold on one second. Yeah, it is starting Reshimas Hamenorah Ayin and onwards. It goes for a number, and also printed in Reshimas Hamenorah. David shared with us that the Rambam did not mean that matter is literally made of the four elements, but was being metaphysical. Some elements are fluid, other gaseous, etc. Okay, so yeah, these are more properties, and I guess for more information, please refer to David. And finally, if we say the Mishkan of the Beis Hamikdash represents the brain or the neshama of the world, what do we do now we are in Galus after the Churban? That is a fantastic question, and a question which is very relevant at this time when we are mourning for the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. So there are a number of answers. One answer is very simply, we know that even though the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, that the Shechina the Shechina did not leave its place, and therefore the site of the Beis Hamikdash is still the presence of godliness within the world. Also, you can look in Kuntras Beis Rabbeinu Shebebavel, where the Rebbe quotes the Gemara that from the time the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, the Shechina now rests in the Beis Hamedrash of the Nasi Hadar, and therefore in the Beis Hamikdash of the Nasi Hadar, that is where we have the Iker Gili HaShechina, the ultimate revelation of godliness within the world. And of course, there is also the Beis Hamikdash within the Neshama, the Etzem and Neshama, which there can be no Churban, there could be no destruction. So thank you for those questions, and have a wonderful night. Please
Rabbi
join
Johnson,
us again.
Rabbi Johnson, the Reshimas that you're reading from, can you just show it up? Put